It's not every day you acquire a son out of the blue. One minute I was walking down the street, minding my own business, the next, a tiny pair of arms were clamped firmly around my calf, and a small tearful voice wailed, "Mommy!" I froze, utterly baffled. I didn't even have a boyfriend, let alone a child. Looking down, I saw the culprit, the cutest little boy imaginable, with a milky white, perfectly round face that just begged to be gently squished. His hair was soft and slightly curly. My heart melted on the spot. Maternal instincts I never knew I possessed surged through me. I ruffled his fluffy hair and crouched down, keeping my voice as gentle as a spring breeze. "Hey there, little fella," I murmured. "Where are your grown-ups?" He pouted, squeezing his eyes shut in a valiant effort to produce actual tears. "Lost," he mumbled pitifully. "Lost? Oh boy. This was complicated." Just as I was debating whether our next stop should be the nearest police station, a figure suddenly hurried towards us. "Leo!" a voice called out. A deep, resonant voice that was surprisingly easy on the ears. Instinctively, I looked up and felt my breath catch. Wow. Talk about hitting the genetic jackpot. Every angle of his face seemed sculpted precisely to my personal aesthetic preferences. Tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit that stood out against the backdrop of hurried pedestrians, he exuded an aura of quiet confidence. A small sigh escaped me internally. Just my luck. A man this fine and clearly already a father. I gently took the little boy's hand. "Is this your daddy?" I whispered. The boy shook his head vehemently. "Hold on. Good-looking and potentially a kidnapper?" My internal alarm bells started clanging. Never mind the handsome face. I shifted into protective mode instantly. Pulling the little guy slightly behind me, I squared my shoulders, trying to look more formidable than I felt. "What's his name?" I demanded, my voice firm. The man blinked, seemingly taken aback for a second, then answered calmly, "His name is Leo." I turned to the small child peeking out from behind my legs. "Your name is Leo?" He nodded solemnly. "But you just said he wasn't your dad?" "He's not," Leo confirmed, his big eyes wide as he looked up at me. "He's my uncle." Then, with the uncanny wisdom of a tiny, seasoned matchmaker, he added pointedly, "My single uncle." Single. Uncle. Those two words sent an unexpected jolt right through my nervous system. I nodded slowly, giving Leo's chubby cheek a gentle pat. "Well, calling me mommy is a bit much then, isn't it?" I grinned, feeling a spark of mischief. "Be a good boy and call me Auntie Ava." Leo, bless his determined little heart, didn't miss a beat. "Auntie Ava," he chirped brightly, his earlier distress completely forgotten. The Uncle Ethan I mentally dubbed him just stood there, momentarily speechless. A quick glance confirmed his handsome face wore a mask of pure, unadulterated exasperation. "All right," he finally managed, his voice smooth despite the situation. He took Leo's hand firmly in his. "Thank you for looking out for him just now." He gave me a brief, polite nod and started to walk away, gently tugging the boy along. Seriously? No follow-up? The kid practically handed him an engraved invitation by calling me auntie, and he didn't even attempt to get my contact information. Some people were just hopelessly clueless about seizing an opportunity. I frowned, half tempted to call him back, but a glance at my watch snapped me back to reality. Work. I was going to be late. Forget it, I muttered to myself. Romance would have to wait. Sighing, I pushed the aborted meet-cute from my mind and took a shortcut through a narrow alley, jogging the rest of the way to my office building. However, after waiting through 2 full cycles of the crowded ground-floor elevators, I ran into 2 familiar faces. Leo and his devastatingly handsome single uncle. "Auntie Ava," Leo yelled, his little voice carrying surprisingly well. He launched himself towards me like a small, enthusiastic cannonball and barreled straight into my arms. I instinctively caught him, a little bewildered. Did I suddenly radiate some kind of irresistible maternal glow? First being mistaken for his mom, now this enthusiastic auntie business. As I was pondering this, a tall figure stopped right in front of me. It was the uncle, Ethan. He stood considerably taller than me, looking down with an apologetic expression. "He's just a kid, gets overly excited. Please don't mind him." "Of course not," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. Feeling bold, I decided to push the envelope just a little. Honestly, any girl would be thrilled to be called auntie by the nephew of such a handsome uncle. I waited, holding my breath for a reaction, a smile, a flicker of interest, anything. 1 second. 2 seconds. Nothing. He simply averted his gaze, a slight flush perhaps creeping up his neck, but offered not a single word in response. My brief surge of confidence deflated like a punctured balloon. I turned away, feeling a wave of awkwardness wash over me. Okay, so maybe running into each other twice was fate, but perhaps it was the ill-fated kind. Either my charm wasn't working, or this guy was genuinely made of stone when it came to flirting. I caught my reflection in the glass door beside the elevator bank. Curvy, presentable. Surely not that resistible? Yep, definitely him being clueless. Case closed. Thankfully, the elevator doors dinged open just then. I squeezed myself and my handbag into the already packed car. The morning rush in. Our building was intense. Ethan and Leo didn't stand a chance and were left standing quietly by the doors, waiting for the next one. Just as the doors slid shut, I thought I saw Leo tugging insistently at his uncle's trousers, letting out a sigh that seemed far too world-weary for his age. "Uncle," his little voice drifted faintly. "I gave you a golden opportunity and you totally blew it." The elevator ascended, cutting off the rest of their conversation. Stepping out on my floor, I hurried to clock in, just 1 minute to spare. Perfect timing. I ambled over to my desk, watered my little potted succulent, and booted up my computer. Time to ease into the workday with a quick game of spider solitaire. My usual morning ritual. But it was strange. My mind wasn't on the cards. All I could see was the uncle's handsome face. Even the spiders on the virtual card seemed to morph into his features. What was wrong with me? And why did he seem so familiar? I racked my brain, trying desperately to place him. Had I seen him at the company before? In a mall? Around my apartment complex? Nothing clicked. Giving up, I tried to focus on my game. But I wasn't prepared to see him again just half an hour later. This time we were sitting directly across from each other in the main conference room. And naturally, perched beside him was the little milk pudding-faced cherub, grinning cheekily at me. "Auntie Ava," Leo announced brightly to the room. "Your future husband is here to bring you lots of money." My jaw nearly hit the polished surface of the conference table. I shot panicked glances at the uncle and my boss, who was sitting at the head of the table. "Careful, kid," I silently screamed. Those kinds of words could get me fired. Who on earth could have guessed that Leo's handsome, single uncle was the Ethan Cole, our company's biggest and most important client? This wasn't just an uncle. This was the golden goose, the cash cow, the client who must be pleased. As I cautiously lifted my head, my eyes met Ethan Cole's. And suddenly it clicked. That Ethan Cole. The big client everyone whispered about. It was him. Weird, how did the nephew and uncle share a last name? Wait, no, that wasn't important right now. What was important was figuring out why this major client had specifically requested me, Ava, the relative newbie who'd only been here a couple of months, to handle his massive new account. The thought alone sent a tremor of panic through me. And how, in the span of less than an hour, had he discovered my identity based solely on his nephew's impromptu anti-declarations? My boss, however, didn't give me time to dwell on these mysteries. He was a shrewd old fox, already smoothing things over. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, his eyes darting between the three of us, he chuckled. "Mr. Cole, our Ava here is quite new to the team. If there's anything that isn't quite up to your standards, please do be understanding." He was watching Ethan's reaction like a hawk. So was I. Ethan simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "No problem," he replied casually. "She's one of us." One of us? My eyes widened. What did that mean? Just then I saw Leo propping his chin on his hands, give me a conspiratorial wink. Before I could process that, the little guy hopped off his chair, trotted around the table, and plopped down right next to me, latching onto my arm with surprising familiarity. "Auntie Ava," he whined softly. "I'm hungry." I was caught between amusement and sheer terror. "Sweetie," I whispered urgently, leaning close. "I was just joking around earlier. You can call me Ava or Miss Ava. Really, no need for the auntie. My job, my lovely, well-paying job, felt like it was hanging by a thread woven from a kindergartner's whimsy." Leo acted as if he hadn't heard a word. He just tilted his cherubic face up at me, his grip tightening slightly on my arm. "Auntie Ava," he repeated firmly, "I want a hamburger." This was not going well. I shot a desperate, pleading look at my boss. But the man, usually prone to slightly greasy compliments, was now the picture of unwavering resolve. Ava, he declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. Take Mr. Cole and young Master Cole out for a nice lunch. Put your other projects on hold for the next couple of days. Your sole priority is ensuring Mr. Cole and his nephew are well taken care of. Young Master Cole. The title made my stomach clench. Armed with a hefty sum transferred to my account by my boss for entertainment expenses, I found myself escorting the two Coles, one large, one small, both immensely valuable, out of the company building. To say I was nervous was an understatement. My earlier bravado on the street, fueled by anonymity, had completely evaporated. This wasn't just a handsome stranger anymore. He was the client. Outside the building entrance, I positioned myself strategically to block the sun from Leo's face and knelt down. Young Master Cole, I began, forcing my most charming smile and gentlest tone. What would you like to eat? Hamburgers, he declared instantly, his eyes sparkling. He leaned in conspiratorially. I've wanted one for ages, but Uncle never lets me. He says they're unhealthy. With that, he gave me a surprisingly strong shove towards his uncle. Auntie Ava, you ask him for me. He'll definitely say yes if you ask. Caught off guard, I stumbled right into Ethan Cole. Great. Just great. Taking a deep breath, I straightened up and faced the formidable client. I stammered, the carefully rehearsed professional opening vanishing from my mind the moment I met his eyes. They really were remarkable, deep set. Intense, the color of dark chocolate. You could easily get lost in them. It took a conscious effort to pull myself back. Leo mentioned he'd like hamburgers. Kentucky Fried Chicken isn't too bad, maybe we could? Okay. Ethan agreed immediately, cutting me off. He held my gaze, his dark eyes seeming to probe mine. Do you want some? He actually asked me. I weighed my options. Honesty seemed safest. I do like it, actually. It was true. Whatever other girls did. I was powerless against the allure of fried chicken, burgers, and spicy crayfish. Hot pot and barbecue were high on the list too. He nodded once. Then let's go. Just like that. No fuss, no pulling rank. His direct gaze left me feeling slightly dizzy, my brain temporarily short-circuiting. It wasn't until we were seated in a booth at the nearest KFC, with Leo happily browsing the menu on my phone, that reality crashed back in. What on earth was I thinking? The boss gives me a massive expense account, stresses the importance of impressing these two VIPs, and I bring them to KFC. Catastrophe. Disaster. Career suicide. I snatched the phone back from Leo mid-order. Leo, sweetie, maybe not burgers today? How about I take you somewhere really fancy? A big proper meal. Leo stared at the phone, then at me. His lower lip starting to tremble as tears instantly welled up in his big eyes. Oh no. Making the client's nephew cry? That was definitely grounds for immediate dismissal. I started to panic. It's fine, Ethan's calm voice interjected. He casually draped his expensive suit jacket over the back of the vinyl booth seat. Let him have it. He's clearly been craving it for a while. The client had spoken. I wasn't about to argue. Nodding quickly, I handed the phone back to Leo. The little guy was surprisingly reasonable, choosing only a few of his favorite items without going overboard. Ethan, when asked, remained indifferent. Anything is fine, was his standard reply. This made ordering for him tricky. Finally, Leo tugged my sleeve and whispered, loud enough for me to hear but perhaps not his uncle. Auntie Ava, don't bother asking him. He's never even had KFC before. I shot a quick glance at Ethan. He had a slight frown on his face but didn't deny it. Point taken. Taking the phone back, I added a generous selection of other items to the order. Hey, it was the boss's money. It wasn't peak lunch hour, so the restaurant wasn't packed, but this particular branch seemed overwhelmed. We waited ages before our order number was finally called. I started to stand up, but before I could take a step, a warm hand closed around my wrist. I expected it to be Leo, but it was Ethan. He met my surprised look, then quickly released my wrist, his expression carefully neutral. I'll get it, he said curtly, and strode off towards the counter. A small chubby hand tugged me back down onto the seat. Auntie Ava, sit down, Leo instructed bossily. Fetching food is a man's job. I sat, internally sighing. Yes, but your uncle isn't just any man, kiddo. Ethan returned shortly, balancing two heavily laden trays. He'd actually needed one of the staff members to help him carry everything. Eat up. he said simply, setting the trays down. He lacked airs, wasn't overly talkative, but he was surprisingly thoughtful. He expertly poked the straw through the lid of my cola before handing it to me and squeezed out packets of ketchup onto a napkin for both of us. Very gentlemanly. Exactly my type. Too bad, I reminded myself, that while the nephew was sharp in matchmaking, the uncle seemed completely immune to any kind of hint. After my 2 failed attempts earlier that day, I'd given up any romantic fantasies involving Mr. Ethan Cole. My mission now was simply damage control. Survive the next couple of days and keep the client and his nephew reasonably happy. However, just as I took my first bite of the burger, Leo dropped another bombshell. "Auntie Ava," he said conversationally, munching on a fry, "you should really consider my uncle. Seriously. If you manage to land him, forget about just this business deal. The whole darn company could be yours." Ahem. Cough. The sheer audacity of the statement, coupled with a mouthful of burger, made me choke violently. Almost involuntarily, my eyes darted towards Ethan. He showed absolutely no reaction. He calmly picked up another French fry, dipped it meticulously in ketchup, and didn't even spare me a glance. Any tiny flicker of hope that had sparked within me was instantly extinguished by his deliberate indifference. I took a large gulp of cola and, summoning my courage, reached over and gently ruffled Leo's soft hair. "Nice hair," I thought absently. "Feels just like I imagined. Eat up, kiddo. The more you eat, the safer my job is." Lunch eventually concluded without further incident. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I could finally send the esteemed Coles on their way. But Leo, with surprising speed, latched onto my arm again. "Auntie Ava, I ate way too much," he announced plaintively, his voice syrupy sweet. "I need to walk it off. Let's go shopping at the mall." He blinked his big, innocent eyes at me, and damn it, I felt my resolve weakening. I looked towards the actual decision-maker. Ethan still wore that same mask of cool indifference, but he gave a slight nod. "Let's go." Then, his gaze flickered over my outfit, a simple blouse and skirt I'd worn to the office. He frowned slightly. "We'll get you something new too." That definitely felt like a judgment. Was he implying my clothes weren't up to par for accompanying them? Before I could even formulate a polite refusal, Leo was already dragging me towards the exit. I assumed we'd just pop into the nearby department store. Nothing too fancy. Maybe I could even use some of the boss's money to buy Leo a small toy, curry some favor with the young master. However, Ethan led us to his car. A Volkswagen Passat. Or so I thought initially. I raised an eyebrow internally. Interesting. Not all wealthy CEOs needed flashy sports cars. Ethan seemed refreshingly down to earth, though the interior looked suspiciously plush and customized. Trying to make conversation and perhaps score some points, I leaned forward from the back seat as we pulled away. "Mr. Cole, you know, you're really not like those other flashy millionaire types I used to know. So discreet with your car choice. My brother actually has a Passat too, although," I added with a laugh, "the inside is nowhere near as luxurious as yours." My attempt at flattery seemed to fall flat. An odd silence descended in the car. I caught Ethan's eye in the rearview mirror. Was that a hint of amusement in his expression? Was all he said, a low hum from the front seat. Just then Leo tugged my sleeve again. "Auntie Ava," he whispered conspiratorially, "this isn't a Passat." He paused for dramatic effect. "It's a Phaeton." Oh, right. The ultra-luxury sedan VW made that look deceptively like a Passat to the untrained eye. Read my eye. I shifted uncomfortably, fiddling with the leather seat. I could only manage a weak, forced laugh to cover my utter mortification. My toes were practically cramping inside my shoes from cringing so hard. As the awkward silence stretched, Ethan's voice came from the front again, smooth and even. "If you prefer the Passat, I can arrange to drive one tomorrow." "Excuse me?" I wasn't sure I followed his logic. Change cars?" I asked tentatively. We happened to stop at a red light. Ethan turned slightly, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror again. His expression was unreadable, devoid of any discernible emotion. "To a Passat," he confirmed flatly. "Okay then. Whatever you like is fine," I mumbled, feeling completely out of my depth. Why was he saying things like that? As if my opinion on his car choice actually mattered. Soon, the definitely not a Passat pulled into the underground parking garage of a notoriously upscale shopping mall. I knew of this place by reputation, a haven of luxury brands where price tags were rumored to induce heart palpitations. My palms started to feel a little sweaty as I recalculated the boss's expense fund in my head. Would it even cover a single purchase for the young master here? Despite mentally bracing myself, half an hour later, I was utterly dumbstruck. Firstly, because the prices weren't just high, they were astronomical, exceeding even my most pessimistic estimations. Secondly, and more shockingly, because it turned out I was the one they were shopping for. They led me into a high-end designer boutique. Ethan spoke only one sentence to the hovering sales associate. Find her a couple of outfits. Then he retreated to a plush velvet armchair in the waiting area and began sipping nonchalantly on a cup of tea, leaving me to the wolves. Feeling like a lamb led to slaughter, I found myself steered towards the dressing rooms, clutching 2 dresses Leo had picked out with surprising decisiveness. Several overly enthusiastic sales assistants practically pushed me inside. Alone in the opulent fitting room, I nervously checked the price tag dangling from one of the dresses. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. This deceptively simple-looking sheath dress cost almost as much as my entire annual salary. Terrified of snagging the delicate fabric, I changed with painstaking care. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the door and stepped out. Walking felt unnatural in something so expensive. I nervously smoothed down the skirt. Is this okay? I asked weakly. As the words left my mouth, both Ethan and Leo looked up simultaneously. Maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by nerves and the exorbitant price tag, but for a fleeting instant, I could have sworn both pairs of eyes, one large, one small, lit up with appreciation. Ethan stroked his chin thoughtfully, his fingertips brushing lightly against his jaw. The momentary spark in his eyes vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual cool composure. After a moment's silence, he glanced at the hovering sales associate beside me. No need to try the others, he stated quietly. Bag up all of them. Me. Is this what being pampered feels like? Feeling utterly dazed and slightly guilty, I walked out of the boutique wearing a dress worth several months' rent, and carrying shopping bags containing clothes whose total value probably exceeded my yearly income. It wasn't that. I didn't try to refuse. I did repeatedly, but they simply wouldn't take no for an answer. Every time I protested, Leo would promptly threaten to tell my boss to fire me. The little manipulator knew exactly which buttons to push. At the checkout counter, I'd made a valiant attempt to pay, gritting my teeth, but one look at the final figure confirmed the utter futility. Even combining the limits on all my bank cards wouldn't have covered the cost. And they still wanted to continue shopping. Panicked at the thought of further financial devastation, even if it wasn't my money, I quickly feigned a sudden, severe stomach ache, insisting we needed to leave immediately. This wasn't shopping. It felt more like aiding and abetting some kind of luxurious crime spree. As we finally stepped out of the mall and into the fresh air, I couldn't hold back any longer. I bit my lip, gathering my courage, and asked the question that had been swirling in my mind. Mr. Cole, I began hesitantly, keeping my voice low. Are you by any chance interested in me? Ethan froze for a solid 2 seconds. Then, unless my eyes were deceiving me, a distinct flush crept up from his collar to the tips of his ears. He frowned, then smoothly took the heavy shopping bags from my hands, his voice carefully neutral, almost curt. Don't overthink things. A simple phrase seemingly denying my question. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, quickly followed by a confusing pang of disappointment. Looking at his handsome profile as he strode towards the car, I couldn't help but indulge in a brief, ridiculous fantasy. What if Ethan Cole had secretly known me for ages, harboring a hidden crush? Yeah, right. That kind of plot only happened in cheesy romantic dramas. The rest of the journey was straightforward. Ethan received a phone call, apparently needing to attend to some private business, so he drove me home first. Leo initially protested, wanting to come up to my apartment, but Ethan firmly deposited him back in the car. You're too much trouble, was Ethan's blunt explanation to his nephew. Defeated, Leo slumped in his seat, pressing his chubby face against the window. As they drove away, he called out something that sent a shiver down my spine. Bye, Auntie Ava. We'll come find you again tomorrow. I managed a weak, forced smile and waved until the car disappeared around the corner. Only then did I finally let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What had I gotten myself into? My momentary weakness for a handsome face and a cute kid had somehow entangled me with these two forces of nature. Regret gnawed at me. That night sleep didn't come easily. I stared at the expensive shopping bags sitting on my chair, the tags still attached. The more I looked at them, the more uneasy I felt. Before finally drifting off, I carefully folded the clothes and put them back in their bags. Tomorrow I decided I would try to return them. If they took them back, I'd return the money to Ethan somehow. I couldn't let them think I was some kind of gold digger. However, the next morning, I was jolted awake by the ringing of my phone. An unfamiliar number. I have terrible morning grumpiness. Being woken up abruptly put me in a foul mood. Hello. I barked into the phone. There was a 2-second pause on the other end. Then a familiar, low, and undeniably pleasant voice responded. We're downstairs. I blinked, my sleep-fogged brain struggling to catch up. Who is this? Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole? I rubbed my eyes, the gears in my head slowly starting to turn. Ethan Cole. I shot upright in bed, glanced at the clock on the wall, then scrambled to the window and peered down. Sure enough, parked right below was the understated, but secretly luxurious phaeton. Leaning against it, looking impossibly cool and composed, were two figures. One large, one small. Ethan and Leo. Okay, be right down. I stammered, hastily hanging up and bolting for the bathroom. A frantic whirlwind of activity followed. Brushing teeth, washing face, changing clothes, applying a hasty layer of makeup. I even skipped my usual leisurely morning routine. As I hurried downstairs, I assumed today would finally be about business. Discussing the contract, hammering out details, right? Wrong. The moment I stepped out of the building, Leo launched himself at me again, grabbing my hand and bouncing excitedly. Auntie Ava, you have to come to the water park with us today. Please. Water park? My mind, betraying all professional decorum, immediately conjured an image of Ethan Cole in swimming trunks, his upper body bare. TSK. Shame on me. Before I could even formulate a polite refusal, Leo piped up again, pointing. Auntie Ava, why are your ears all red? Caught red-handed or red-eared. I quickly rubbed my earlobes, feigning nonchalance. Just slept on them funny, I mumbled unconvincingly. I was quickly learning that saying no to these two was an exercise in futility. My automatic, half-hearted attempt to decline the water park invitation was swiftly overridden, and minutes later, I found myself buckled into the back seat of the phaeton once more. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from my boss. Ava, keep Mr. Cole and the young master happy. Whatever Mr. Cole requests, find a way to accommodate him. No excuses. Don't even think about coming back to the office otherwise. Classic carrot and stick. Immediately after the threatening message, another notification popped up. A transfer of several $1,000s into my account. The message attached read, Activity Fund. It was rare for my notoriously frugal boss to loosen the purse strings like this. I accepted the transfer without hesitation, but his words echoed in my mind. Whatever Mr. Cole requests. What if he requested me? Thinking about it objectively, if that happened, I wasn't entirely sure I wouldn't be getting the better end of that deal. My scandalous thoughts were interrupted as Ethan expertly navigated the car out of my neighborhood. It was clear this wasn't a spontaneous trip. The back seat already held swimsuits and inflatable rings. My sharp eyes noticed several different women's swimsuits neatly folded. Is anyone else joining us? I asked hesitantly. Ethan glanced at me briefly in the rearview mirror. No, just the three of us. Then, all these swimsuits? Leo, sitting beside me, eagerly answered before his uncle could. Auntie Ava, you don't know my uncle. He has terrible decision paralysis. He couldn't figure out your style, so he just bought a bunch of the most popular ones from the store for you to choose. Wow. Okay. Rich people really did operate on a different level. At Leo's urging, I picked through the selection. There were at least 6 or 7 different styles. I finally settled on a sleek, black one-piece. My reasoning was simple. I'd glimpsed the men's trunks Ethan had apparently packed for himself, and they were also black. A subtle, secret matching couple's outfit. Perfect. Thanks to Leo's constant, cheerful chatter, the drive to the city's largest water park passed quickly and wasn't nearly as awkward as I'd feared. Tickets purchased, we headed towards the separate men's and women's changing rooms. When I emerged, clad in the black swimsuit, I saw them waiting near the entrance. The tall, striking man and the adorable little boy made quite a pair, drawing more than a few admiring glances. Ethan held 2 swim rings, one large and one small. As we approached the water, he handed the smaller one to Leo and offered the larger one to me. "Oh, thank you," I said gratefully, taking it. "This is perfect. I'm actually not a very strong swimmer." The 3 of us waded into the cool water. Only then did I belatedly realize the implications of water park attire. My gaze, almost against my will, drifted towards Ethan's upper body. Okay, wow. He looked even better than I'd imagined. He was definitely the lean muscle type, looked trim in clothes, but clearly well-toned underneath. Tall and athletic, with defined muscles glistening slightly with water. Through the ripples, I could even make out the distinct lines of abdominal muscles. I wasn't the only one noticing. Several women nearby kept casting surreptitious glances his way. In fact, the female population in our immediate vicinity seemed to have mysteriously increased since Ethan Cole entered the water. Soon the siren blared, signaling the start of the artificial wave session. I braced myself, clinging tightly to my swim ring, but the first big wave hit me harder than expected. Suddenly I was tumbling, flipping over and sputtering underwater. Instinctively, panicking slightly, I flailed towards where I'd last seen Ethan. Simultaneously, a strong arm wrapped securely around my waist. Pure survival instinct took over. Without thinking, I latched onto him, wrapping my arms around his neck and my legs tightly around his waist, desperate to get my head above water. Cough. Splutter. Gasping for air, I finally realized the awkwardness of our position. The man I was clinging to like a limpet was indeed Ethan, and he was completely rigidly still beneath me. He was staring down at me. His usually impassive face now flushed a startling shade of crimson, right up to his ears. Our eyes locked for several seconds. And then slowly, a thin trickle of bright red blood began to seep from under his nose, winding its way down towards his lip. "You." I stared aghast. "You." I repeated, unable to form a coherent sentence. The wave subsided, and the pool returned to a relative calm. My immediate reaction was to reach up and try to wipe the blood away, but he flinched, turning his head slightly to avoid my touch. "Mr. Cole, did I hit you?" My mind raced back to the chaotic wave. I remembered being thrown against someone just before I went under. Had I accidentally slammed into his face? Ethan still wouldn't meet my eyes. He quickly wiped his nose with the back of his hand, his expression unreadable but definitely strained. "It's nothing," he muttered, turning his gaze towards a distant point across the pool. Now, for a normal person, a little nosebleed from a knock in a wave pool wouldn't be a big deal. But this wasn't a normal person. This was the client, the golden goose. According to my boss, even a single hair falling from his head was practically my responsibility. I couldn't risk it. Decorum be damned. I grabbed Ethan's wrist and practically dragged him towards the pool steps and onto the surrounding deck. Once on solid ground, a sudden thought struck me. Leo, was the little guy okay? I whipped my head around frantically, scanning the crowded poolside. Relief washed over me as I spotted him. He was already out of the water, wrapped in a fluffy towel, sitting on a lounge chair and happily chatting up a little girl about his age. Okay, nephew secured. I turned my attention back to the uncle, leaning closer to inspect his nose. And that's when the truly bizarre thing happened. The bleeding, which seemed to have stopped, suddenly started again the moment I got close. What the? Did I possess some kind of bizarre latent vampire ability that specifically targeted rich, handsome clients? Maybe. Maybe I should take you to the first aid station? I suggested, frowning, trying to focus on the injury while pointedly avoiding looking anywhere else. But as I lifted my gaze to meet his, I caught it, just for a split second. Ethan's eyes weren't on my face. They seemed to be momentarily fixed somewhere around my chest level. The instant our eyes met, he jerked his gaze away again, coughed awkwardly, and abruptly turned, striding towards the nearby shaded rest area, leaving me standing there, utterly bewildered. He just left? I wasn't the one caught staring. I hadn't even said anything. Feeling strangely indignant, I watched him go. But then, just a few seconds later, he turned around and walked back towards me. He was holding a large, dry beach towel. He thrust it into my hands, his voice slightly muffled. Here, put this on. It should help. Huh? Help what? I didn't understand. Then I saw it again, the distinct redness creeping up his neck and tinting the tips of his ears. and it clicked. He didn't mean the towel would help him. He meant, if I put the towel on, his nosebleed problem would resolve itself. Oh, my God. His nose wasn't bleeding because I'd hit him. It was bleeding because of me? Because I was standing there in a wet swimsuit? Well now, that was unexpectedly potent information. I mean, I'd always been reasonably confident about my figure, but I'd never imagined I possessed the kind of allure that could literally make a sophisticated tycoon like Ethan Cole spontaneously hemorrhage just by looking at me. This newfound knowledge made me feel suddenly bolder. I let my gaze travel deliberately over him, from his damp hair down his well-defined torso, lingering for an extra second on those impressive abdominal muscles. Ethan seemed to sense my scrutiny. He stood even straighter, his body language radiating discomfort. He cleared his throat, touched his nose almost unconsciously, and flicked a quick, nervous glance at me. He tried to put on a stern face, but it was utterly unconvincing. The telltale flush on his ears, the slight tremor in his hand, the shallow, rapid breaths, he couldn't hide it. My own heart started beating a little faster. Watching his flustered state, 3 things became crystal clear. 1. This wealthy, powerful Mr. Cole quite possibly, probably, almost certainly had a crush on me. 2. He was the absolute textbook definition of menseo, outwardly cool and reserved, but inwardly a bundle of easily flustered nerves. Me in a wet swimsuit accidentally clinging to him? Enough to trigger a physiological reaction. Definitely repressed. Think, I might actually be starting to feel something for him too. I'm not usually one for whirlwind romances, but I don't discount them either. Sometimes, time isn't the only measure of a connection. You can know someone for 20 years and feel nothing, or meet someone once and know they're it. People are different. Whether Ethan and I were actually compatible remained a huge question mark. The gap between our worlds felt vast. Perhaps sensing the heavy silence, Ethan broke it first, gesturing towards the shaded lounge area he'd retreated to earlier. Let's go sit over there. Naturally, to prevent any further incidents involving my apparently lethal swimsuit-clad form, I dutifully wrapped the large towel securely around myself. But despite the covering, the earlier episode had left me feeling flustered and unable to settle. Finally, I couldn't stand the suspense any longer. While Ethan went to buy some drinks, I seized the opportunity and pulled Leo aside. Hey kiddo, I whispered conspiratorially. Can Auntie Ava ask you a serious question? Sure, he agreed readily, blinking his big eyes. What is it, Auntie Ava? Hearing him call me that now, after everything, actually made my cheeks warm. Weird. I cleared my throat, glancing quickly towards Ethan's retreating back. Your uncle. I began, lowering my voice even further. Does he like me? The moment the words were out, I felt a pang of regret. What was I doing, asking a 5 or 6-year-old about romantic feelings? I must be truly desperate. Just as I was about to backtrack and say, never mind, Leo looked up at me with an expression of utter disbelief, as if I just asked if the sky was blue. His posture became comically adult. He pursed his lips, tilted his head, and said with astonishing clarity, He's acting like that pathetic mess and you still need to ask? Well, when he put it like that, he had a point. I hesitated, wanting to probe further, but a glance over my shoulder showed Ethan returning with drinks. I quickly swallowed my remaining questions. Ethan placed a brightly colored orange juice in front of Leo, then set a glass filled with an appealing, sunset-hued beverage down in front of me. Picked it up cautiously. What's this? The bartender recommended it. New fruit wine spritzer. Said it's really good. Try it. Wine. I instinctively pulled my hand back slightly. Oh, maybe not. I'm a real lightweight. Seriously, 1 beer and I'm practically under the table. Ethan looked genuinely surprised by my admitted lack of tolerance. He raised an eyebrow slightly but persisted. It's fine. Just have a taste. If you don't like it, I'll finish it. Whoa, that sounded unexpectedly intimate. Finishing my drink? My boss would probably have a stroke if he knew I was letting the golden goose drink my leftovers. Still, Ethan had insisted. Refusing now seemed rude. He settled back into his chair, sipping his own coffee, and watched me expectantly. Felt like a test. Unable to refuse his quiet insistence, I took a small sip. Okay, credit where credit is due. It was actually delicious. Sweet, fruity, refreshing. But a suspicious thought niggled at the back of my mind. Why was he so keen on me drinking alcohol, however light? Was he trying to get me tipsy? Maybe loosen my inhibitions? Take advantage? Is it good? Ethan's voice interrupted my paranoid internal monologue. I snapped back to attention, about to answer when he reached over, picked up my glass, and took a casual sip himself. He did it so naturally without any awkwardness, as if sharing drinks was the most normal thing in the world. He finished the sip, licked his lips almost imperceptibly, and a faint smile touched his mouth. Quite sweet, he murmured. For all my earlier bravado, I could be surprisingly timid myself. Also repressed and awkward, apparently. When Ethan was the flustered one, blushing and stammering, my courage soared. I could boldly check out his abs, even jokingly suggest his nephew call me auntie on our first meeting. But the moment he made a move, however small, like sharing a drink, I was the one who turned into a puddle of nerves. It was just sharing a glass. Analyzed logically, it was a minor intimacy bordering on childish. Yet my heart was hammering against my ribs, and I could feel my cheeks flushing. Honestly, sometimes I felt like I was regressing. Thankfully, the rest of the afternoon passed relatively normally. We chatted, ate some snacks, soaked up the sun, me still securely wrapped in my towel. Ethan made no further ambiguous moves, which allowed me to relax slightly. However, just as we were packing up to leave, disaster struck. My bracelet was gone. It wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, but it meant the world to me. It had belonged to my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago. She told me it was a family heirloom passed down from her own grandmother. Since my mother died when I was young, Gran had given it to me. It was a simple string of small, smooth jade beads, the only tangible thing I had left of her, my most cherished keepsake. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Panic surged. When had it fallen off? Where? I had absolutely no idea. Without even stopping to explain, I spun around and started retracing our steps, frantically scanning the ground. But the water park was huge. Where would I even begin? What's wrong? Ethan's voice came from behind me. He'd followed me, his brow furrowed with concern. I quickly explained, the words tumbling out in a rush, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole, but this bracelet, it's incredibly important to me. It's the only thing my grandmother left me. Maybe we can discuss the business details tomorrow? I really need to try and find it. Ethan didn't respond. He just gave me a strange look, then turned abruptly and walked away. I stared after him, my heart sinking. He was probably annoyed. After all, my boss had assigned me to entertain him, and here I was about to abandon him and his nephew to search for a lost trinket. But right now I couldn't worry about that. If I lost that bracelet, I knew I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Steeling myself, I turned back and began systematically searching the paths we'd walked. But after covering half the park with no success, the park's loudspeaker system suddenly crackled to life. And then I heard Ethan's calm, clear voice echoing across the entire park. Attention, please. If anyone has found a bracelet made of small jade beads, please bring it to the main broadcast room. There will be a substantial reward. Simple, direct. Very much his style. After a brief pause, his voice came again, carrying clearly through the speakers. As a token of gratitude, the finder who returns the bracelet to the broadcast room will receive a reward of $5,000. $5,000? Good grief. While the bracelet was priceless to me, objectively it wasn't worth nearly that much. If I tried to sell it, I'd be lucky to get a few hundred. I stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the announcement, then shook my head and resumed my search. But now I wasn't the only one looking. Suddenly, dozens of people around me were bending over, scanning the ground intently. $5,000 was a powerful motivator. Finding a lost bracelet had just become the park's most popular activity. Another sweep of the pathways yielded nothing. My next thought was the pool. It was possible it had slipped off when the wave knocked me over. I vaguely remembered thinking recently that the class felt a bit loose. I'd meant to get it repaired after this client assignment was over. I should have done it sooner. I hurried back to the wave pool area. Forgetting about swim rings or decorum, I waded straight back into the water. It wasn't particularly deep here. Maybe chest high, but the water wasn't clear, making visibility poor. I had to bend low, skimming the surface, peering down at the pool floor. I searched for what felt like hours, meticulously combing the area. Gradually, the initial frenzy of reward seekers died down as people lost hope and gave up on the easy money. Soon it was just me, methodically searching as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the water. Eventually, a firm hand grasped my arm, pulling me gently but insistently towards the edge of the pool. It was Ethan. The evening air felt noticeably cooler now. The park was emptying out, and the temperature had dropped. Stepping out of the water, a gust of wind made me shiver. Ethan was holding another dry towel. Without a word, he wrapped it firmly around my shoulders. He was frowning, his expression conveying a hint of displeasure. "Stop looking," he said quietly. "But I've booked a room for us at the hotel inside the park," he interrupted smoothly. "Go get something to eat, rest for a bit. I'll help you search again later tonight." My first instinct was to refuse, to insist on continuing the search. But one look at Ethan's set face, the determined line of his jaw, made me reconsider. The unspoken message was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. My protest died in my throat. Finally, I nodded silently in agreement. Truthfully, I had absolutely no appetite, but I didn't want to antagonize Ethan further over something so trivial. I forced myself to eat some of the dinner he ordered to the room. Strangely though, he insisted I have some red wine with the meal. 2 glasses. Red wine always hit me hard. Being the notorious lightweight I was, 2 glasses were more than enough. By the time dinner was over, my head was spinning pleasantly. Ethan gently took my arm, his touch sending a surprising jolt through me. "Let me walk you back to your room," he murmured, his voice low. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come out. The room was tilting slightly. Feeling dizzy and disoriented, I found myself leaning against his solid frame as he guided me down the hotel corridor. As Ethan used the key card to open my door, a hazy thought floated through my woozy mind. What now? Is he really going to try something now that I'm tipsy? But the moment he gently deposited me onto the soft bed, darkness claimed me. I was asleep before my head even fully hit the pillow. When I woke up, the glowing screen of my phone showed it was past 11 p.m. I groaned, rubbing my temples, and sat up, taking stock of my surroundings. The room was empty. Just me. My memory slowly returned. The lost bracelet. The dinner. The wine. I quickly threw back the covers and checked myself. Clothes still on, undisturbed. A wave of relief washed over me. But the bracelet. My priority resurfaced. Throwing on my shoes, I hurried out of the room and headed back towards the pool area. On the way, I wondered if the pools were even open this late. Would I need to find a staff member? As I approached, however, I saw warm yellow lights illuminating the main pool deck. And there was someone in the water. A man wearing a dark dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and dark shorts, both completely soaked. He was wading slowly through the pool, his tall frame silhouetted against the underwater lights, constantly scanning the bottom, occasionally bending down to scoop something up. It was Ethan. I stopped in my tracks, standing silently in the shadows just watching him. A hard knot of something deep inside me seemed to soften, to melt away. A cool night breeze rustled the nearby palm trees. Just then, Ethan looked up, perhaps sensing my presence, and his eyes met mine across the water. He froze, looking surprised to see me. I have to admit, in that moment I was genuinely moved. Deeply. I'd never imagined that a scene straight out of a romantic drama, the handsome, wealthy hero going to great lengths for the ordinary girl, would ever actually happen to me. I walked slowly towards the edge of the pool, wanting to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. It was Ethan who spoke first, a sheepish, apologetic look on his face as he ran a hand through his wet hair. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Still haven't found it." I just shook my head, my heart overflowing with emotions I couldn't articulate. Finally, I managed a soft, "It's okay." And I meant it. Really was okay. I'd never expected this man, who was, until yesterday, just a very attractive, very important client, to literally wade through a pool in the middle of the night, searching for my inexpensive sentimental bracelet. I stepped closer to the water's edge, looking at his drenched clothes clinging to his frame. "You should come out," I urged gently. "You'll catch a cold." "I'm fine," he dismissed, automatically re-rolling a sleeve that had slipped down. He hesitated, then added, "Look, I know I could hire people to search. But something that clearly means so much to you. I just felt like it would be more meaningful if I found it myself." He touched his nose briefly, that little nervous gesture I was starting to recognize. "You should go back and sleep," he continued. his voice low in the quiet night. If I really can't find it alone, I'll hire a team. I promise you'll have it back by morning. He spoke calmly, but his gaze was incredibly intense, his words carrying the weight of a solemn vow. I stood there by the pool watching him. The night was still and quiet, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water and the distant chirping of crickets. We just looked at each other in the soft lamplight. After a long moment of silence, a slow smile spread across my face. This time when I spoke, my voice was clear and steady. Ethan, I asked, looking him straight in the eye. You don't really actually like me, do you? I'd asked before, half joking, testing the waters. This time I was completely serious. Ethan was serious too. He seemed momentarily stunned by the direct question. Then recovering, he first rubbed his nose, then slowly, deliberately met my gaze again. Yes, he said, his voice quiet but firm. He took a step closer through the water, stopping just a few feet away. His eyes locked on mine. I've liked you for a very long time. A long time? I couldn't help but laugh softly. But we only properly met a few days ago. A faint smile touched Ethan's lips. He waded towards the edge and hoisted himself up to sit on the poolside, water dripping from his clothes. Almost automatically I moved to sit down beside him. As my arm brushed against his wet sleeve, he suddenly shifted away slightly. Seeing my surprised look, he quickly explained, My clothes are soaked. Ah, right. The silence stretched again for a moment, then he picked up the thread of our conversation. Do you really think, he asked, his voice low and earnest, that I would put myself through this for someone I only met a few days ago? Good point. I didn't know how to respond to that. Ethan seemed to realize his words might have sounded accusatory. He quickly clarified. What I mean is, I've known of you for a long time. Much longer than you realize. Known of me? I looked at him, confused, but waited for him to elaborate. He stared off into the distance for a moment, seemingly lost in memory. Then, before he even uttered another word, his face started turning red again. I watched, fascinated, as the blush spread right up to his hairline, tinting his ears crimson. It was almost comical. This had to be the most endearingly repressed man I had ever met. And frustratingly, his handsomeness made it impossible to truly hold it against him. Seeing my amusement, Ethan seemed to rally himself. He turned back to me abruptly. When you were at your previous company, he explained, his voice slightly rushed, I noticed you. For a long time. My previous company? Seeing my puzzled expression, he nodded. Your old office building was the same one as mine. And? I prompted, intrigued now, noticing the blush deepen even further. And well, I paid attention to you. For quite a while. Impossible. I exclaimed, shaking my head. Ethan Cole was ridiculously striking. If we had been in the same building, sharing elevators, passing in the lobby, surely I would have remembered seeing him? Even a fleeting glimpse would have registered. Absolutely impossible. Ethan's expression shifted then. The blush faded, replaced by a slight frown, and his voice dropped lower. You were involved with someone else back then, he said quietly. You wouldn't have noticed me. I blinked, taken aback. He was right. I had been dating a colleague at my old company. Blindly infatuated, in fact. My ex was the classic pretty boy type, slim, delicate. Features utterly charming on the surface. Unfortunately, he also had the morals of an alley cat. He lived off me, sweet-talked me constantly, and used my money to wine and dine other women. The relationship ended explosively when I caught him red-handed, after which he had the gall to blame me, calling me frigid and repressed. That I couldn't tolerate. My repressed nature was my business, thank you very much. A couple of swift slaps and a hasty retreat later, I'd resigned and blocked him on everything. But thinking back, I honestly had zero recollection of ever seeing Ethan Cole during that time. A man like him? Unforgettable. How could I have missed him? Then, Ethan began to fill in the gaps, revealing a story I could scarcely believe. Apparently, Ethan Cole, CEO of his own successful company, had developed a crush on a random girl in the same office tower. Why? Not for any profound reason. Simply because this girl had a habit of using the reflective windows of his parked car, a dark-tinted Bentley, no less, as her personal mirror. She'd strike poses, adjust her makeup, and generally act completely uninhibited in front of it. Me. That girl was me. Oh God. My stomach plummeted. I remembered that Bentley. It was always parked in my favorite corner spot in the underground garage when I arrived early in my beat-up old car. I'd always assumed, seeing the heavily tinted windows, that it was some rich person's unused vehicle gathering dust. Who knew there was actually someone inside it, watching my daily pre-work ritual? Mortification washed over me in waves. I desperately tried to recall all the things I might have done in front of that car window. The memories flooded back, each one more horrifying than the last. Touching up lipstick? Definitely. Picking something out of my teeth? Probably. Squeezing a rogue pimple? Oh God, possibly. Taking selfies? Yes. Turning this way and that, checking out my own figure in the makeshift mirror? Absolutely a regular occurrence. The more I remembered, the hotter my face burned. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was weapons-grade, socially catastrophic humiliation. I couldn't take it anymore. Needing to escape, I scrambled to my feet, intending to flee and perhaps dig a hole to hide in forever. But before I could take a step, a hand shot out and clamped firmly around my wrist. It was Ethan. He looked down at me, his expression serious, intent. I snuck a peek. Yep, the tips of his ears were definitely red again. He just stared at me, his throat working silently. He looked impossibly nervous, which was strangely endearing. He seemed like he wanted to say something important. I braced myself, expecting something along the lines of, "Will you go out with me?" Or, "Can we try dating?" Instead, his grip on my wrist tightened slightly and he said, his voice low and urgent, "Get ready." My brow furrowed. Ready? Ready for what? He didn't answer my question directly. Instead, he murmured almost to himself, "I can't hold back anymore." Before I could ask what he couldn't hold back, he raised his free hand. His fingers, cool from the pool water and trembling slightly, gently cupped my chin. His other hand came up, softly covering my eyes. The world went dark. And in that sudden blackness, a soft warmth pressed against my lips. Thump thump, thump thump. My heart exploded into a frantic rhythm against my ribs. His lips were incredibly soft, the sensation sending shivers down my spine. For a moment I hesitated, wondering if I should push him away. But then I felt the gentle pressure of his tongue parting my lips. And just like that, all thought ceased. He kissed me with a surprising intensity, a quiet desperation that consumed my senses. I forgot how to react, my hands instinctively clenching the fabric of his damp shirt, my pulse roaring in my ears. The world seemed to stop, suspended in that kiss. When he finally pulled back, he slowly lowered his hands. His breathing was slightly ragged, and the flesh on his ears seemed even deeper now. He looked down at me, his dark eyes intense, focused, holding mine captive. "Ava," he said, his voice husky. "Let's be together." He paused, then added softly, almost hesitantly, "Okay." This powerful, successful man, asking for my permission so gently. Like a true gentleman, even in his confession. Okay. Of course it was okay. More than okay. A playful smile touched my lips. I beckoned him closer with one finger. "Come here," I whispered. "I'll tell you a secret." We were sitting side by side on the edge of the pool, bathed in the soft glow of the overhead lights, the moon casting silvery ripples across the water's surface. The poolside was deserted, just the two of us in our own little world. Ethan hesitated for a second, then leaned closer, bringing his face just inches from mine. I could see my own reflection shimmering in the dark depths of his eyes. "What secret?" he asked, his voice low, a hint of tension in his frame. He licked his lips nervously. I grinned. "Honestly," I murmured, my lips almost brushing his ear. "When I saw you wading through the water earlier, searching for my bracelet, I wanted to kiss you right then and there." It wasn't a long confession, but it seemed to hit Ethan with the force of a small explosion. He stared at me, stunned, for several seconds before the meaning registered. A slow, dazzling light ignited in his eyes. "You." He started, speechless. "You what?" "You big dummy," I teased softly, then closed my eyes and leaned in, mirroring his earlier action, and kissed him. Still just as soft as I remembered. I slowly raised my hands, my fingers tangling in the collar of his wet shirt, gently pulling him closer. He really was endearingly awkward. My initiating the kiss seemed to have momentarily paralyzed him. His body went completely stiff. "Ethan," I murmured against his lips after a moment. Came his muffled response. The kiss ended, a soft, lingering pressure. Feeling bolder now, I rested my head against his shoulder. Why are you such a coward sometimes? I asked lightly. Ethan was silent for a beat. He seemed to turn his head slightly to look down at me. Can I offer a rebuttal? Nope, I said firmly. All right, he sighed, a hint of laughter in his voice. He relaxed slightly, putting an arm around me. When you encounter someone truly special, it's natural to feel a bit intimidated. His use of the word intimidated made me chuckle. I nodded in mock agreement. You're right. Girls like me, devastatingly gorgeous, amazing figure, sparkling personality, we are pretty special. Intimidating even. I was of course being mostly sarcastic. But Ethan seemed to take my words completely seriously. He nodded thoughtfully, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips. Yeah, he agreed softly. That's exactly why I never seriously thought that you'd actually agree to be with me. I blinked, surprised by his sincerity. Are you serious? He nodded again. I leaned back slightly, looking at him. It struck me then, no matter how successful or confident someone appears when it comes to matters of the heart, almost everyone carries a little bit of insecurity. Anyone with eyes could see that I was the one punching way above my weight in this scenario. I guess my only truly special quality was the utterly bizarre way I'd crashed into his meticulously ordered world. From his perspective, I must have seemed like the strangest girl imaginable, completely oblivious to his presence in the car, using his Bentley window for dental hygiene and impromptu photo shoots. I could guarantee no other woman had ever behaved like that in front of Ethan Cole. Most women probably tried to impress him with their elegance, their intellect, their flawless composure. I, on the other hand, had inadvertently presented myself as, well, uniquely unfiltered, perhaps even a bit unhinged. Other women were a clear, refreshing stream. I was apparently the chaotic, unpredictable mudslide. Maybe rich guys just have peculiar tastes, I mused silently. Perhaps after years of gourmet dining, stumbling upon a weird little three-legged frog hopping into view might seem oddly charming. It was the only explanation I could come up with for why Ethan Cole would secretly harbor feelings for me. Suddenly, a cooler breeze swept across the pool deck. I shivered involuntarily, leaning closer into Ethan's side. Let's get you back to the room, he said immediately, his voice laced with concern. It's getting chilly. He stood up, offering me a hand, then hesitated for only a fraction of a second before putting a protective arm around my shoulders, tucking me close against his side as we walked. I nodded, but couldn't resist one last glance back towards the now dark water. A tiny pang of sadness for the lost bracelet remained, but it was overlaid with a strange sense of peace. Maybe losing it wasn't entirely bad. Perhaps it was the catalyst, the unlikely matchmaker, that brought Ethan and me together. Maybe it was even Gran pulling some strings from the great beyond. I comforted myself with the thought. Ethan walked me back to my hotel room. At the door he released me, then gestured towards the room next door. I'm right here, he said. Just knock if you need anything. He stood there, looking every bit the perfect gentleman, showing absolutely no intention of trying to come inside, despite the late hour and the day's events. A mischievous impulse took hold of me. I stepped closer, reaching out to trace the line of buttons on his still damp shirt with one finger. Doesn't Mr. Cole want to perhaps come in for a nightcap? I asked, my voice deliberately low and suggestive. For a split second, Ethan maintained his composed, successful businessman facade. Then his expression froze, his body stiffening instantly. I stifled a laugh. Finding his flustered state utterly adorable, I leaned in even closer, letting my breath ghost against his ear. My bed is very soft, you know, I whispered playfully. He remained frozen for several seconds, then abruptly pushed my hand away, spun on his heel, and practically bolted back to his own room next door. Call if you need anything, floated back down the hallway as his door clicked shut. I leaned against my own doorframe, laughing until tears came to my eyes. His bright red ears as he fled were an image I wouldn't soon forget. Thinking about it, Ethan and I were strangely similar. Both of us had contradictory personalities, and in romance we seemed to operate on the same principle, like two ends of a spring, constantly testing, pushing, and pulling. When one advanced boldly, the other retreated nervously. When I took the initiative, Ethan turned into a blushing, stammering mess, culminating in his hasty escape just now. When he took the lead, I wasn't much better, heart pounding, cheeks flaming. Maybe we actually were kind of perfect for each other. Filled with these warm fuzzy thoughts, I finally crawled into bed. Just as I was drifting off, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message. From Ethan. Let me tell you a secret too. My curiosity instantly piqued. I quickly typed back. Okay, tell me. His reply came almost immediately. 2 short sentences that made my face burn hotter than it had all day. Actually, I got a nosebleed in the car once before too. The time you wore that low-cut top. Oh, my God. He meant that time. The tight, admittedly cleavage-bearing top I'd worn under a sensible jacket. I hadn't taken the jacket off all day at work. But then exiting the parking garage, finding it deserted, I'd inexplicably decided to shed the jacket and conduct a full impromptu photoshoot/figure assessment using the Bentley's windows. The memory made me want to burrow under the covers and never come out. The embarrassment was reaching new, subterranean levels. But embarrassment aside, I couldn't let him have the last word. I quickly typed back a sassy reply. Constant nosebleeds are usually a sign of weakness, you know. Should I order you some, vitality supplements, old man? His response was instantaneous. No need. You'll find out soon enough whether I need them. Find out what? I thought indignantly. Big talk from the guy who just fled my doorway like it was on fire. But despite the teasing banter, I fell asleep holding my phone, a ridiculous, giddy smile on my face. Apparently, when you're falling in love, even your dreams turn pink and fluffy. Utterly sappy. The next morning, I was woken by a persistent knocking on my door. Grumbling, I stumbled out of bed and opened it, still half asleep. My eyes focused on a devastatingly handsome face. Ethan. I stared at him blankly for a few seconds, then my brain finally kicked into gear. Oh God. Morning face. Messy hair. No makeup. I instinctively tried to slam the door shut, but he was too quick, putting a hand out to stop it. He pushed the door open gently and leaned against the frame, his eyes traveling over me from head to toe. To my surprise, there was a distinct glint of amusement in his gaze. Don't hide, he said, his voice warm. You look cute like this. Really? I asked skeptically, hyper-aware of my probable state of disarray. My sleep-rumpled clothes from yesterday, undoubtedly wrinkled. My hair a tangled mess. No makeup, probably still had sleep crusties in my eyes. Cute? Was he delusional? But his expression seemed utterly sincere, so I hesitantly stopped trying to shrink away. Hold out your hand, Ethan instructed softly, stepping fully into the doorway. Confused but obedient, I held out my hand towards him. The next moment, something cool and familiar slid onto my wrist. The jade bead bracelet. How? I gasped, staring down at it, completely stunned. It was back. How? Ethan smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. Let's just say I hired some very motivated help overnight, he explained vaguely. I stared at the bracelet, then back at his hand, which still rested lightly on my wrist. His fingertips were ice cold. Liar. He'd found it himself. It was only then I noticed he was holding a shopping bag from a different, less exorbitant store. Seeing my glance, he handed it to me. Bought you some fresh clothes. Go get changed. I took the bag but noticed he wasn't making any move to leave. I raised an eyebrow, summoning a bit of my earlier mischief, and struck what I hoped was a playfully seductive pose. Well, Mr. Cole? Not leaving. Planning to stay and admire the view while I change. I fully expected him to blush and retreat again. But this time he just looked me up and down slowly, that amused smirk reappearing. His face didn't turn red at all. I'll wait for you out here, he said smoothly, then stepped back into the hallway, pulling my door gently closed behind him. I carried the bag over to the chair, planning to hit the bathroom first. But one glance in the mirror stopped me dead. Oh, God. The mirror reflected pure horror. Hair sticking out at comical angles, bangs forming a perfect definite eye gunk. A faint dried drool mark near the corner of my mouth. Puffy morning face. Slightly greasy skin. Every single morning after cliché, present and accounted for. No wonder Ethan hadn't blushed. He'd been laughing at me internally. That earnest "you look cute like this" comment suddenly felt like the cruelest mockery. That big fat liar. After a thorough wash and dressing in the comfortable, normal clothes Ethan had bought, I emerged from my room, feeling slightly less like a goblin. Waiting in the corridor were now 2 figures. Leo spotted me immediately and launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around my legs with his customary enthusiasm. Auntie Eva, he bellowed, loud enough to wake the dead. This time I was the one blushing. After all his persistent it was actually real now. Perhaps fueled by sheer excitement, Leo was exceptionally talkative during breakfast, spilling all sorts of secrets between mouthfuls of pancakes, his leg pressed companionably against mine under the table. Apparently, he'd seen photos of me long before our first meeting. I looked up at Ethan in surprise, but he just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the wallpaper. Leo, however, had no such qualms. He grabbed Ethan's phone off the table, unlocked it with practiced ease, and shoved it in front of my face. "See, this is him secretly taking pictures of you." I looked down and my blood pressure instantly spiked. It was a photo of me, taking a selfie with the Bentley in the background, striking some ridiculous pose. I vaguely remembered doing that. I hadn't realized Ethan had captured the moment from inside the car. A random line of poetry popped into my head, sounding unexpectedly romantic in this context. You stand on the bridge enjoying the scenery, while the admirer watches you from the balcony. Thanks to Leo's cheerful and unprompted confessions, the full picture of the past few days finally emerged. According to Leo, after being subjected to countless interrogations by Ethan featuring my photos, "Isn't your future auntie pretty, Leo? Isn't she?" My face was firmly etched. In his memory, the encounter on the street hadn't been entirely accidental. Ethan had been inside a nearby cafe buying coffee when Leo spotted me through the window and made a unilateral decision to run outside and initiate contact. His mission: secure a wife for his clueless uncle. The mommy cry was pure strategy, an attempt to establish an immediate connection. My unexpected suggestion that he call me Auntie Ava had played perfectly into his little matchmaking scheme. His uncle, meanwhile, had apparently choked under pressure. Concluding his narrative, Leo shot Ethan a look dripping with exasperation, shook his head sadly, and sighed dramatically. "Honestly, uncle, so useless sometimes." Ethan just sipped his coffee, pointedly ignoring his nephew. As breakfast wound down amidst Leo's continuing stream of consciousness revelations, Ethan suddenly sent Leo off on an errand to buy some juice from a nearby kiosk. I offered to go instead, but Ethan stopped me, pulling out his wallet and handing Leo a couple of large bills. "Go on, sport." Leo skipped off happily. I looked at Ethan, puzzled by the maneuver. Before I could ask, he stood up, walked around the small table and sat down right beside me in the booth. His familiar scent, a subtle mix of expensive cologne and something uniquely him, enveloped me, making my nerves tingle again. "You." I started, unsure what to say. He just smiled, a slow, confident smile. And this time, his ears remained stubbornly pale. "Yep, definitely the spring dynamic." My turn to be flustered, apparently. He casually rested one arm along the back of the booth behind me, leaning slightly closer. His voice dropped to a low murmur, meant only for me. "I've wanted to kiss you," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, "for a very, very long time." Then, he tilted his head and pressed his lips firmly against mine. But the kiss lasted all of 2 seconds before being abruptly shattered by a loud burst of laughter from directly behind us. We both whipped our heads around simultaneously. Leo had popped up from behind the back of the booth, his chubby hands clamped over his mouth, giggling uncontrollably. "Ha ha ha ha. I've wanted to kiss you for a long time," he mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Uncle, that sounds so cheesy." Ethan froze, looking utterly mortified. He turned back to me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Was that really cheesy?" he asked, genuinely concerned. I nodded solemnly, preparing to offer some gentle constructive criticism. But before I could utter a single syllable, his hand came up, gently cupping my chin. And his lips claimed mine again. Any further commentary I might have offered was effectively silenced. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan reach out with his free hand, casually placing it directly in front of Leo's face, blocking the little spy's view. Then his other hand still holding my chin, right there in the corner of the busy hotel restaurant, he deepened the kiss. His lips moved against mine and he murmured, his voice muffled but determined, "Too late to regret it now." My eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze just inches away. I could see myself reflected there. A smile played on my lips. I reached up my own hand, mirroring his action, and gently covered Leo's eyes when he tried to peek around Ethan's hand. "Yeah, definitely too late." But I thought, smiling into the kiss, even cheesy Ethan Cole was ridiculously handsome. Lucky me.